Hi, welcome to our well-being web series titled Recharging Your Resilience. My name is Vanessa Oliver, and I'm a dietitian with the University of Kentucky Health and Wellness Program, and I'm going to talk to you today about overcoming emotional eating. Just to sort of introduce the topic, I know that we don't always eat to satisfy hunger, right? A lot of us eat for other reasons, maybe emotional reasons from time to time. But when eating becomes the only or the main strategy that we use to manage our emotions, then that's something that we want to take a look at as an opportunity for change. And I just want to say that no matter how powerless that you might feel right now about emotional eating and food cravings that might accompany this, there is an answer. By practicing mindful eating techniques, you can recognize some of the unhelpful emotional habits that you might be harboring and help to reestablish a better working relationship between food and your feelings. So just to let you know what we'll be talking about today, here's our outline. We're going to look and see what emotional eating is so we can recognize it and recognize the differences between emotional hunger as well as physical hunger. We'll help define the cycle that might be present during an emotional eating episode, and I'll give you some tips and strategies on how to manage emotional eating when it occurs, as well as 10 more specific action items that you might try. Maybe they'll be meaningful for you. And then at the end, I'll talk about some wellness resources that we've got right here on campus in case you'd like to explore this a little bit further. So let's look and see what emotional eating is first, right? We want to sort of know what we're facing. The most sort of primary definition that we have for emotional eating is eating for reasons other than hunger, right? Instead of the physical symptom of hunger initiating our eating behaviors, we eat maybe to relieve stress or to cope with unpleasant feelings or emotions that are causing these feelings. Some examples, I mentioned stress. Another one could be boredom, maybe sadness, maybe fear, right? It is also possible that we can eat to sort of celebrate pleasant emotions. You know, that I'm not going to ignore that, but primarily today we're talking about managing unpleasant emotions through food. And emotions certainly are the trigger, right? And since emotions and not hunger are the trigger, then your body probably doesn't need fuel at that particular time that you're eating. And also when we're in that sort of stressful state of mind, the kinds of foods that we are eating are usually foods that are higher in maybe sugar or salt or fat, something that delivers a punch to the system, because it's that jolt that we're looking for. We're looking to change our situation, right? And so somewhere in our brains we think that, okay, this kind of food is the answer. Now, of course, those foods that we choose, the ones that are higher in sugar and salt and fat, they tend to be a little bit higher in calories too. And if you're trying to manage your weight or just eat in a manner that generally promotes health, then this can be an issue. This extra intake can, of course, lead to maybe overeating or eating some foods at the expense of other foods, maybe some weight gain, and possibly some guilt as well. Things that we don't really like, right? And occasionally, as I mentioned, using food as a reward or a celebration, it's going to happen, right? Even as a pick-me-up. It may or may not be the worst thing, but if food and eating are your primary emotional coping mechanisms, okay? If your first impulse when you're feeling sad or mad or angry is to open up the refrigerator or open up the cabinet, then you get stuck. And you get stuck in this unhealthy cycle where the real emotion or feeling or situation that's triggering the emotion is never actually getting addressed, right? So emotional hunger can't really be filled with food, okay? It's not a one-to-one relationship. Eating might feel good in that moment, but the underlying feelings or emotions or situation that have been triggered are still there and they haven't been dealt with yet. So let's go on. Just, since you're here, you probably are identifying a little bit as an emotional eater, but here anyway are some questions that you can ask yourself, right? If you have strong yeses to one or more of these, then you might be using eating as an emotional coping strategy. So do you eat when you're not hungry? Does food make you feel safe? Is food a reward for you? Do you regularly eat beyond satiety or beyond that feeling of fullness? Do you eat to soothe yourself? And do you often feel powerless around food? Again, if you answer a strong yes to one or more of these questions, then you might be identifying yourself as an emotional eater. Now, I mentioned that, we're going to look at some differences between emotional and physical hunger. And at this point, you might be thinking, yep, okay, so far I'm checking all the boxes. That's me. I am identifying as an emotional eater. Now what, right? We want to lay a foundation for managing and overcoming this habit of emotional eating. And so we want to make sure that we can recognize these differences, because sometimes you're just hungry, right? And that's fine. We don't want to tamp that down, but we do want to learn these differences between physical and emotional hunger. So let's look at emotional first. There are clues that you can use, right, to tell these apart. And awareness is definitely key. I would say the big key to this awareness too is to be more aware in your everyday sort of life situations, not necessarily in the stressful moment, because when you are more aware of these differences between emotional and physical hunger, then you're going to be more likely to recognize them when you most need to. So let's look at emotional hunger. The first one I've got here is a sudden, overwhelming, and urgent need to eat. Okay, that would be a sign that it's emotions that are at play. And this need to eat needs to be satisfied absolutely immediately. Okay, you got a one-track mind at this point, and there's no doing anything else. You might have also some very specific cravings, right? Who here has thought, I need some chocolate right now, or I need some peanut butter, or I need some chips? It's probably not for physical hunger that you're looking for those particular foods. These foods, as I mentioned, provide a jolt. Look what I mentioned just off the top of my head, right? I mentioned chocolate, I mentioned peanut butter, I mentioned chips. These are sweet, these are fatty, these are salty, okay? All of these foods are providing that instant rush, that jolt, that change to our current situation. And nothing else is going to do. Sometimes when it's emotional eating, you'll notice that it's a very sort of quick and private sort of behavior. Before you know it, you're done, right? For some people, this is a result of feeling shame about the particular behavior, and the shame might make you tell yourself that you shouldn't be doing this, so you better get it over with, before someone catches you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Next, a full stomach doesn't satisfy, right? What I mean by that, your stomach's not satisfied by the eating because you're not physically hungry, right? You're emotionally hungry. And these emotions have not been acknowledged, let alone addressed. You keep looking for more and more self-soothing, and this can look like eating until you're actually uncomfortable. And since emotional hunger is not, located in the stomach, not necessarily, you feel your hunger not necessarily as a belly pang, but as that specific craving that focuses on specific foods. And then what can happen last, as I've got on this emotional side of the screen here, is that shame cycle, okay? You feel feelings of shame, feelings of guilt, feelings of powerlessness. And then what happens when you feel bad? You might eat again, and then you might feel bad again, and then you might eat again. And it can go on, okay? So we want to try to recognize that this happens and then look for ways to manage this. Now, again, give you some clues of what physical hunger can look like, because it is important to recognize that this does happen, it should happen, it's a completely normal mode of existence, right? And the thing that can happen is that sometimes we get really good at tamping down those feelings of physical hunger because we feel like that we should be, but I want to make sure that everyone can learn to recognize what this true physical hunger looks like, okay? Generally, it's more gradual. The urge to eat is not as dire or demanding. You can have a little bit of patience with yourself. You don't need that sort of instant gratification of I must eat this thing right now. Lots of foods sound good, right? When you're physically hungry, you know, you could pretty much eat anything. We've talked to clients before about using the apple test. If you feel like you have an urge, if you can eat something like an apple, it doesn't have to be an apple, but something that, you know, has fiber and is filling and is crunchy and takes a little bit of time to eat, go on and eat that. And if you're still hungry after that apple, then maybe there's some emotional eating afoot, right? If you are not hungry after that apple, because it'll probably fill you up and create some satiety for you, then it was most likely a physical hunger situation. Next, we've got satiety equals completion, right? So you feel satisfied when your stomach is full. This is the opposite of emotional eating, of course, where a full stomach does not signal satisfaction. And you don't have negative feelings after you eat for physical hunger because you're simply giving your body what it needs when it needs it. So let's look again at this cycle. I mentioned that we would be talking about this, and this can be expressed in a lot of different ways. This is just one. I want you to remember to look at that core of the emotional eating cycle, okay? And at its core, emotional eating it's a stance that you're taking against yourself. And what you're doing is telling yourself, what I'm feeling is not okay, all right? And we eat to get rid of that discomfort that we're feeling with ourselves. But we can't get rid of our emotions, right? We can't change our emotions. But what we can do is change our responses to those emotions. And some of that is going to happen through recognizing what this emotional eating cycle is. Because there is a difference, right? You have your emotions or these feelings or a particular situation, then you have your response to these emotions or feelings or situation, and you want to be able to recognize and separate these two, and then you can strategize from there. So let's look at this cycle. We have the trigger, okay? This is usually what we're faced with first, right? This is the stress, this is the event, this is the situation. Something is going to trigger emotions that's causing us to eat, right? And we have the craving, okay? We're wanting to control our feelings somehow, and right now our way to do it is through food, okay? We're doing this as a need to escape, to temporarily feel better, and we get to the food and we eat to feel something. We might be feeling contentment, even if it's short term, okay? We might feel somewhat satisfied, but again, it's temporary, all right? Because what happens eventually is the feelings, okay? The feelings maybe of guilt, the feelings maybe of failure or of disappointment, feeling like you blew it or you lost control or you ate a food that wasn't on your list. You ate the forbidden food. I will say, just as an aside, we're not big fans of rules as far as food rules are concerned over at Eat Well. And if you don't have the rules that you can break, then you won't break the rules. So maybe that can be a mantra for you. So that sort of defines what each stage of the cycle is. I want to go through a few interventions at each stage, again, just to get you thinking about what might work for you. So especially too, I want to say, if you find yourself on autopilot when this is going on, and that autopilot may not shift immediately, right? And that's normal and natural and fine. But you can work on these strategies and work on some self-reflection and recognize what the steps are before they happen, okay? And then you can have these strategies ready to go. So ask yourself, what is my trigger? Okay, what is causing my response to this in this way? What is another way that I can relieve this stress, this trigger? When it comes to craving or when it comes to food, maybe you can identify the trigger and you still make that decision. You're like, yeah, I'm going to eat the thing. That happens. Okay, maybe there are some steps and interventions that you can take at this stage, right? Maybe you can look at what type of food you're choosing, or maybe look at the portion size that you're choosing. Have maybe portioned out items of things that are available to you. When it comes to feelings, I think the most important thing is to recognize the feelings. Okay, don't tamp them down. All right, you can recognize them, maybe reframe them. Okay, but then move on from them. All right, and ask yourself along the way, what have I learned from this experience? All right, and a great way to ask yourself and learn from yourself is to keep some kind of journal. A lot of people will actually have a physical journal that they write in, or it can be something that you do on your phone or computer. Take photographs. Do something, though, that initiates this type of self-reflection. Because you have to see what the patterns are that you're doing. You have to recognize those patterns before you can change them, right? And recognizing what these patterns are will also help you become just a little bit more comfortable with that discomfort that might be created, right? Once you can recognize what's going on. So here I've got, I've got 10 management strategies that might work for you, or at least get your brain working as far as maybe thinking of things that might work for you. I want to say that anything that you do should definitely be personal, okay? So these are only meant to be jumping off points for you. The first one I have, nurture your reality. Accept reality. After you nurture it, that can be maybe a funny thing to think about, but despite your best efforts, there's always going to be a particular time that you eat when you're not physically hungry. And again, this is not a deal breaker, okay? As long as you're working to minimize how often this occurs, if you've identified that this is a problem for you. Learning to recognize true hunger, we've talked about this. Looking at those differences between physical and emotional hunger. Before you automatically eat, perhaps use the hunger scale, right? Rate your hunger on a scale of 1 to 5. Make every effort to do something else besides eating if you're not so hungry, if you're on the 4 or the 5 end of that scale. Next, learning to sit with difficult feelings, okay? Sitting with them, not suppressing them. Acknowledging troubling feelings can be challenging for a lot of us, okay? Especially if we've been told not to do so in the past. But it is okay to have negative feelings. It is a part of life, all right? Ask yourself, how am I experiencing this now? Am I ashamed right now? Do I feel like there's not an easy solution? Why do I feel bad right now? All right. Delay, distract, and then decide. That's our next one. Maybe perhaps have a go-to list of alternatives that you might do instead of eating. Maybe reading or knitting or housework, whatever you feel like might help you surf the urge to eat, and eventually that urge can subside. Finding non-food sources of pleasure, so looking elsewhere for comfort. Think about what emotion is driving you to eat and what other way that you can help react to that emotion besides food, okay? Are you stressed out? What helps you relieve your stress besides food? Maybe taking a walk. Maybe doing some stretches at your desk. If you're sad, can you put on some happy music or watch a funny clip on YouTube? If you are lonely, can you reach out to a friend or family member, or at least make a phone date? You might have a list of friends that you know that you can turn to when you need them. But think about these things that you can do to self-soothe without turning to food. The second column here, allowing yourself the foods that you love. This is so important, you guys. eat a balanced diet, but do not deprive yourself. Okay, please. If you're not getting enough calories, for one, to meet your energy needs, then certainly you're going to be more likely to, give in to any eating because you're hungry. All right, but you might also be giving into emotional eating because you are feeling deprived, you're feeling sad, you're feeling angry, you're feeling lost. So feeling deprived definitely fuels cravings and bad decisions. So plan so that you're not feeling deprived. Don't have those rules where there's just foods that are, off limits. Conversely though, if you know that you have a particular food that is maybe really difficult for you to stop eating once you've started, then maybe don't have that particular one within easy reach at the house or at your desk, okay? If you're faced with it elsewhere and you really want it, then you eat it. But engineer your environment so, you're giving yourself a good head start, all right? You're making the better choice, the easier choice, as it says there on the screen. Improving sleep hygiene. I know sometimes this is easier said than done. Oh my goodness. But research does show that sleep deprivation can increase hunger by decreasing leptin levels, which is the hormone that regulates your appetite and signals fullness. So furthermore, too, with adequate sleep, you're going to be less tired, right? And you'll have more resolve to fight off some of those eating urges. And be kind to yourself, right? Moving your body, absolutely. Physical activity, exercise or physical activity regularly can help you relieve stress, put you in a positive mindset, be more likely to, encourage yourself to make positive changes, and making it more likely to be kind to yourself, okay? If you do give in to emotional eating, it's okay, right? Forgive yourself. You can always start over in the next hour, the next meal, the next day, the next week, all right? Try to learn from the experience, sure. Make a plan for how you might deal with things in the future, but continue to focus on the positive changes that you're making in your habits and give yourself credit for making these healthful changes, all right? Some action items, I said I would give you these. These, again, knowing what you want to do or knowing that you want to eat differently is one thing, right? Figuring out how to not to overeat and how to get there when you're overwhelmed is another. White knuckling it, just bearing down, that can only go so far. So I do recommend crafting your own list to beat stress eating triggers, but I can say this list should mean something to you, okay? You can take some of these ideas and make them your own, or you can start completely from scratch. But the two best tips I can give you are to make them meaningful and not to wait until you need them to come up with them. So quickly blowing off steam, right? Yell or play loud music or run or walk or dance or vent or scribble or knead some bread or whatever works for you. Phoning a friend, we've mentioned this before. Maybe have a go-to list for emailing or phone or Skype or something like this. Change your scenery. Can you leave the room? Can you sit in a different chair or face a different wall? Sometimes just these shifts in your reality, however small, can present a very literal as well as figurative change in your perspective. Try to create some comfort in your body. Relax and stretch. Find ways to comfort yourself that don't involve food. Escape, even if it's for 30 seconds, right? Take a walk, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, make some tea, maybe Google some images of a beach or a spa or your happy place, whatever it takes just to escape for a very short period of time. I've mentioned journaling, writing it out, giving yourself maybe some bullet points of what you can do instead of turning to food. Sometimes you just need to rant. Okay, this is a little bit different than blowing off steam in that you may want to go to a private place to do it, right? Find a bathroom stall or your car and use your words as you need to. I've mentioned sleep. I'll mention it again. Can you sleep more? Can you? Are there things that you could put aside? Can you create a better sleep environment for yourself? Making a list ahead of time, not in the moment. Maybe ID your top 3 action items for that day, every day, and make the first one something that you do just for you, however big or small it might be. And lastly, breathe. Breathe. We call these nickel breaths or 1 to 5 breaths, but you're going to breathe in for 5 and then breathe out for 5. And being able to do this helps you focus on your breath, helps you focus on your heartbeat. If you find that your heartbeat's been getting elevated or your breath has been getting irregular because you're stressed out, then just focusing on these nickel breaths can be very, very helpful. All right, so some takeaways here as we wrap up. Try to build in some flexibility and protect yourself against any rigid rules that you might be fighting against. Remember that there is no such thing as perfect with any behavior change, but certainly not with nutrition or emotional eating. There's no one way to do it right, okay? And conversely, there's no way to do it wrong, all right? You just do your way. We've seen restriction be so counterproductive in so many ways. And if you're depriving yourself of something that you love, that sets us up to fall off whatever wagon we've created, right? A lot of us forbid certain foods, and I will say that if complete withdrawal from something pushes up really aggressively against your own personal preference, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? We want to encourage sustainability in these health changes. And lastly, I just want to say too that self-compassion and acceptance can absolutely coexist with the want and the need to change. Okay? You can want to improve your health measures and love yourself at the same time. These are not mutually exclusive. So please try to recognize the good in yourself and your actions and train yourself, slowly maybe, but train yourself to speak to yourself kindly and with compassion. And with practice, you can become more comfortable with discomfort, and in turn not use eating as a primary emotional coping mechanism. Instead, you want to use some of the ideas that I've talked to you about today to engage and build in your internal resilience, and use this resilience with stressful situations, stressful thoughts, and stressful emotions. Now, I've got some campus resources up on the screen for you here today. Know that within the Eat Well umbrella of UK Health and Wellness, you can always schedule a nutrition consult. We do these in person, over the phone, or via email. We've even done them over Skype. If you're looking for a little bit more accountability and social support, in addition to education, you can always become an Eat Well member, where we have weekly practice groups and meetings. We also offer a grocery tour. This is a little known benefit for UK employees and their spouses. We do need a minimum of 3 people, but you can contact one of us to schedule something like this. So you can find out about all of this and all of the wellness resources at our website, which is up there on the screen at uky.edu/hr/wellness/eat. And I'm Vanessa Oliver. Just to remind you, this marks the end of our presentation for today. I do want to see if there are any questions in the time that we've got left. I think that they're putting that in the chat box as well, so I can see the chat box, and if I do see any questions, then I'll read them aloud, so those of you who are listening will be able to hear that too. So I have a question about, when does Eat Well begin? Eat Well never ends, okay? If you register for Eat Well by the 4 o'clock or so on the Thursday of a week, you will be able to start the Tuesday of that next week. So it is an ongoing offering from us at Eat Well. Thanks, Deb. Any other questions? And these questions can be about emotional eating, they can be about nutrition or Eat Well programming. Thanks, Brandy. Yes, so Brandy's asking, will this video be saved to watch at a later time? And we are going to put this on our YouTube channel, and I believe that we'll be sending that link out to all of you who have registered as well. Looks like we've got time for one more question. How does a nutrition consult work? Thanks, Betty. So a nutrition consult is pretty easy, and we love them. So please come visit us. You would go to your Live Well dashboard and fill out an intake form for a nutrition consult. Once you do that, then either Karen, Briley McNeese, or myself will get back to you, depending on your scheduling needs and preferences. And then we can set up whatever you desire, whether it's in person, over the phone, or sending you resources via email. And we talk about all kinds of things, okay? So as long as you've got a question about nutrition, we'll work with you to find an answer. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope that you tune in for more of our well-being web series, Recharging Resilience, and we will see you next time. Thank you.